Morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today's Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025, and the House of Commons passed a motion yesterday forcing the Liberals to produce a budget or an update. I don't know what that means. I don't know if they're being forced to actually produce a budget that will have a confidence vote attached to it. I don't know. We'll get to that story when we get to it. Carney has his first ministers' meeting, and they're talking about building big projects, and there's all sorts of talk, but no firm plans. Danielle Smith seems diplomatic, to put it bluntly or nicely. Everybody else is trying to sell us Mark Carney's Santa Claus. That's Doug Ford. So I don't believe Doug Ford. Matt Strauss has an unbelievable speech, and we're going to listen to a big chunk of it because it's spot on. And calling out the communists for what they are, which is unbelievable. Jason Kenney wants to reimagine how the Canadian government works federally, and he wants us to adopt a more EU style, right? Like the EU Parliament style, and instead of our Canadian Parliament that we've got. And so that's interesting. What's your game, Jason Kenney? Well, he's a globalist, I think is what his game is actually. And weird, crazy news. I was going to start here, but it doesn't make sense to start here. We've got tons of juicy government news to go through. We've got Mark Carney's meeting to go through. There's all sorts of really, really big stuff. So me getting my YouTube channel back is kind of minor news, but it's interesting and like, exciting. I got my YouTube channel back yesterday. I'll tell you about it because it's kind of fun. Yesterday, Ron in the Canada Poly chat said, hey, the Corbett Report got his YouTube channel back from years ago. You should check Canada Poly just for a lark. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll check it out. So I sent an email that was probably more rude than it needed to be. I was like, hey, a-holes or something to that effect. You stole my channel years ago. I didn't violate your community guidelines. Give me my channel back. And they did. So that's crazy. So you can surf the old Canada Poly channel, and I'm going to post to it today. And look at that. Look at the hair. Holy smokeronis. I was so young. It's 4 years ago. The last post on the Canada Poly channel was June 24th June 24th. It was 6 days before my birthday. 2021. Happy birthday, Mark P. You lose your YouTube channel, your monetization, everything. Gone. And so Crazy Town. It's back. They said, oh yeah, upon further review, we guess you didn't violate our community guidelines, so you can have your channel back. Here it is. And I shit shocked. I woke up this morning to like 10 emails from YouTube saying that I can't use certain things. A whole bunch of videos have been demonetized and stuff. And I was like, demonetized? I thought the other channel had been blacklisted, had been removed. And I was like, Mark Carney got me. But I guess not. The opposite has happened, in fact. So maybe it's a trap, but I'm walking into this trap enthusiastically. So my YouTube channel's back. Weird, right? So I'm going to post on this one, and I'm going to post on Canada Poly Shorts and on the other YouTube channel. But I think I'm going to normalize at the old one just for fun, because why not? So try and find that. If you can't find that, I'll put a link on canadapoly.com on the website. But I haven't got there yet. It just happened. It just happened. So crazy. Let's do our grab bag of governance. And Dan Miser says, breaking, the Liberals just lost their first vote of this parliament. The Conservatives have passed a vote demanding Mark Carney present a budget before heading off on summer vacation. Canadians deserve to know where their money is going to be spent. Will Carney respect Parliament or disregard Canadian taxpayers? I could see them disregarding Canadian taxpayers. And this is going to be fun to watch. And the concerning thing, I don't know if it's binding in that they have to produce a budget that will then result in a confidence vote, like vote on the budget if you agree with it, if you don't. If that happens, then there's an outside chance, although not super likely, that the government will fall, because this only happened because 4 Liberals were absent, apparently. And that's kind of crazy, if you ask me. John says the Conservatives have just forced con man Carney to produce a budget before taking the summer off. Now everyone will find out what a total bullshit artist this guy is. Yeah, I mean, you can't pass a spending package that doesn't include a budget snapshot. Like, we'd like to go on vacation, but we'd like to also spend all this money we don't have. So just give us the money, bank of mom and dad or whatever. And if mom and dad hand over the money, then more fool them, right? But more often than not, it's like, well, how much are you going to spend on the vacation? You need a budget for the vacation, right? For what you're going to do into the future. You need a budget for that. You need a plan for that. And what'd you do with all the money we gave you last year, right? Let's see the plan for that. And it's a disaster, and they don't want to talk about it. So they just want the money. Give us the money. And I don't think we should allow it. I'm glad there's movement on this. The food professor says conservative amendment to the throne speech passed 166 to 164 in the House yesterday. 4 Liberals were absent, just enough for it to squeak through. The amendment forces the Carney government to table a budget or update before summer. See, that part right there is concerning to me. Minority math in action. So what did he say? 166 to 164. So 4 Liberals absent, and I bet Mark Carney's super mad this morning. Like, that's pretty funny. I'm getting his name wrong, I'm sorry. Says breaking, Parliament just passed a conservative motion ordering Mark Carney to table a budget before the summer break. See, that sounds way better than the or update. So I'm concerned about that or update. You can just interpret that whichever way you want. You could get you could get Chrystia Freeland to give us an update again, and that would just piss everybody off. The Liberals are now forced to table a budget this spring or face a confidence vote. So if they don't table something this spring, they'll face a confidence vote. That'll be interesting. I mean, good. Checkmate, he says. Well done. Good. We'll see. We'll see how it all works out. Brittany has her doubts. She says, I highly doubt this will encourage the Liberals to release a budget. Conservative amendment to the throne speech narrowly passes despite the Liberal opposition. It passes 166 to 164 with all opposition parties in support. All Liberal MPs voted against it, but there were 4 no-shows allowing the motion to pass. So yeah, pretty interesting there. And we'll see how this all plays out. If there is a confidence vote before the summer, I still am not confident that this government will fall. The Bloc Québécois, I've heard rumors, and I haven't seen Blanchette say this, but I've heard rumors that they've said they'll give them a year. They'll support them in a budget. They'll support them in things they pass to give them a chance to govern well. And I think, my gosh, that's terrible. But the Bloc Québécois is 24 seats, 30 seats, something like that. And well enough to give the Liberals, who are 3 seats shy of a majority, the votes they need to stay in power. So, I'm not expecting the government to fall on this, but it would be great. It would be great. But again, I'm not expecting that. But I got my YouTube channel back, so crazier things have happened. Okay, so Lila says, Layla, I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong, says, every day 22 Canadians die from drug overdose. We've lost more lives due to drug overdose in the lost Liberal decade than we lost in the Second World War. Yet Liberals refuse to put an end to their dangerous, Liberal, unsafe supply drug policy. So, If there's something to that theory of we are like black ants and red ants in a jar who will mostly leave each other alone until the jar is shaken and we'll lose our minds. If there's something to the theory that something is or someone is encouraging us to fight each other and kill each other, the drug scourge has been just as effective as the war scourge, and maybe just as profitable for those people who are shaking the jar in that metaphor, right? If you see what I mean. And so they don't need wars. We'll kill ourselves. Weird, but strange. And now we've got MAID as well. It seems like we live in a worldwide cult sometimes, right? Doesn't it feel like that? We have these things that we have to do, and all of these rituals that we have to participate in, the pride flags, the abortion, all of that stuff, right? And it seems very culty sometimes. I feel like somebody's going to ask us to drink the Kool-Aid soon, or, take the fentanyl or something like that. Here is this new MP and her giving her inaugural speech, talking about this stuff.
The honourable member for Fort McMurray.
Failed Liberal drug policies flooding the streets with dangerous drugs, causing crime and chaos in our street, are making the addiction crisis worse. Every day, 22 Canadians die from drug overdose. During the last Liberal decade, we've seen more people die from addiction than we lost in the Second World War. We've heard heartbreaking stories of young people becoming addicted to drugs labeled as safe, only to later lose their life to addiction. Conservatives want to see investment in treatment and recovery. Simple question: will the Prime Minister reverse course and put an end to the deadly, unsafe supply program today?
And the Liberals don't answer questions they don't like, so no point in hearing what they have to say. It's not part of the video either, so it's not my editorializing it, just it's not there. So yeah, it's quite interesting and very concerning, right? Another concerning move by Mark Carney. Bradshaw's highlighting this. Mark Carney is a complete joke. She says Carney is bringing in David Lametti as principal secretary. At this point, I'm just waiting to see when Justin Trudeau is getting hired. Butts and Trudeau together for some kind of PR thing, right? Maybe them and the We Charity Boys will do something. Dan's talking about this, and he's got a whole write-up about Mark Carney bringing in Lametti and Mendocino and the whole Liberal crew, right? And it seems, again, a stretch to believe that these guys represent change, because they sure don't. It's the same team that brought us how many tanks? Like Mendocino and Lametti, weren't they the tanks guys? Weren't they the people talking about bringing tanks in to counter the freedom trucker protesters? It's crazy town. Here's globalist Jason Kenney saying, should we force? So he imagines an EU style of governance in Canada, where the Canadian federal government has basically carte blanche to do whatever it wants, like the EU can do. And if the member states of Canada's federal government don't comply, then the federal government can fine them and can do all sorts of things to them to get them to comply. Basically, it's a top-down dictatorship. And that's criticism of van der Leyen and how the EU is structured. EU parliamentarians themselves have called the EU structure out for being, like, Farage didn't like it. There was another guy from, I think, Czechoslovakia saying, we're sent here and we have to listen to dictates from you and you're irrelevant or something like that. They push back and they say, like, this doesn't make sense. These people who are here don't necessarily represent the will of the people. And that's a problem, right? And so having a whole bunch of people in a far removed land like Ottawa making decisions for Alberta, I'm not on board for that, right? And I don't think Danielle Smith would be on board for that, despite my "What's your game, Danielle Smith?" I have questions. I think that she's made it clear that she does want to fight for Alberta to a degree, right? And so I don't think she'd stand for that, but we'll see. I don't think the people of Alberta would stand for that, right? But here's Jason Kenney saying, the Canadian federal government can be much stronger than they behave. Here we go.
After I became premier, I said to Prime Minister Trudeau in his office that I believe the government of Canada had constitutional superpowers, which it does, to ensure the economic union, and that I would invite a much more aggressive federal government in realizing the entire dream of Confederation, which is an economic union. My God, if they can do this in the 28 member states of the European Union, why can we not do so in the 10 provinces of the Canadian Federation? And I just think it's I'm sorry.
Because the provinces have the notwithstanding clause. If the federal government says they want them to do something, the provinces, I think, can say no, right? And they wouldn't have joined unless they had that power, I believe. Or that was the charter. They wouldn't have signed the charter unless they had the notwithstanding clause. But the federal government, in the way the structure of power was laid out at Confederation, at the creation of the country, the provinces had these jurisdictions, the federal government had these jurisdictions. Those two things were clearly separate, and the federal government had no right to encroach on those jurisdictions into the provinces. And the federal government has actually bought access through giving funding with strings tied to the dollars in order to buy access to provincial healthcare and education and housing. There's no reason for them to be in any of those things. They should not be doing anything with regards to any of those things, but they do, and we should not abide it. But that's creep, but that's not their jurisdiction, and that's very clearly laid out, I believe, in law. Here's back to this.
Time out for provinces. I have a bit of skepticism because I was the premier who went to the Council of the Federation, dropped virtually all of Alberta's exceptions under the Canada Free Trade Agreement unilaterally, hopefully to create some momentum. And there was almost no other province that stepped forward. I then brought in legislation automatically to recognize professional credentials from other provinces. Again, virtually no one's followed suit. So it's time for the premiers to put up or shut up. This is, again, the time to be bold. We had a sense of real urgency about 10 weeks ago because of the Trump threats. Let's not lose that. Let's grasp this opportunity. Let's not waste a good crisis.
Yes, never let a crisis go to waste. My gosh, I think I've used that as a title, but that might be a stand-in title today. So Jason Kenney is, well, it's shocking. I think he's making a play for Conservative Prime Minister. I think the plan is Pierre's ousted and Jason Kenney, grudgingly accepts the leadership of the Conservative Party and leads the Conservatives to a resounding victory, and then becomes a EU-style tyrant or something like that. Rupa says, meanwhile, in Canada, National Post is reporting Via Rail terrorists convinces judge to delay deportation decision due to mental health concerns. Yikes. That's pretty wild. We can't deport these people. They're terrorists, but they've got mental health issues, so it's not their fault. I I don't know about that. Here's Canada Revenue Agency. This is real. This is a real post by our real tax people. And they say, have you welcomed a new child to your family? Congrats, you could be eligible for the Canada Child Benefit. Use our calculator to see how much you could get. And there's the picture of like two 20-year-old men and a baby. And nope, one of these things doesn't fit, but I can't figure out why. It's super weird. Whose baby is that? I wonder whose baby they're holding, right? Carla says, been in an emergency room now for 2 straight days. My little kid needs her appendix out stat. I've been passing hours and hours in here with very little attention. We're lucky enough to have a bed at least. The ER is filled with people and tons of hallway medicine. I don't doubt the doctors and nurses are doing their best, but this is crazy. What's extra frustrating is the amount of drugs and alcohol addicts who are here. We're here for a medical emergency that we did not cause ourselves, and we never use the hospital, while the same addicts end up here day after day. I'm not saying they're not entitled to help, but something is very wrong when the same few people get to clog up the system every single day when there are children and elderly who haven't done anything to themselves waiting for care. Send prayers. I hope we can get her good care that she needs sooner than later. So appendix bursting potentially, but you've got to wait for days in hallway medicine and advocate for access to care, right? Never let a crisis go to waste. Jeepers creepers. And why do we pay for this care? Why? It doesn't make sense. Here's Matt Strauss and his first speech in the House of Commons. Holly Doan says COVID mandates were full communism. Newly elected MP Dr. Matt Strauss tells our Commons in maiden speech. Strauss, an emergency care doctor, was an outspoken critic of pandemic controls. And this speech is just fabulous. We're going to listen to a lot of it. Honestly, go listen to everything. This is on Ryan Garrettson's account at this point. Link should be in the description, but the description's on the paid version on my website and elsewhere where it's paid. So sorry about that, everybody who's on the new old YouTube account. I don't put the link in the description, but it is on the screen, so you can check that out, right? And watch it there. This is great. Again, we're going to watch a lot of this. He makes a lot of really good points, including talking about our failing healthcare. But he talks about the communism that's taking over. He is, I think, being very honest, and it's refreshing because Canadian politicians have not been honest with the Canadian public for a long time. So good job, Dr. Strauss. And here we go.
Sit down and ask him, if he loved the army so much, why did he go back to farming in the village?
His grandfather.
Because, Matthew, you cannot get promoted unless you join the party. That is the Communist Party. Well, then you were an ambitious man, grandfather. Why didn't you join the party? Because, Matthew, if you are in the party and they say this is black, he was pointing at his white tablecloth, then you have to say it is black, even though it is white. English is my grandfather's 5th language. I promise he has never read George Orwell's 1984. But this is exactly the 2 + 2 = 5 scene. I think about this scene a lot when I am told that men can get pregnant. When the truth becomes illegal, everything breaks. If you can't say what's wrong with the tractor, or the levy, or the hospital, or the passport office, you can never fix it, and it will stay broken. So not willing to give up on speaking the truth, my grandfather went back to the village. After a few years, though, the farms were all socialized, and eventually the starvation got so bad they had to make a break for it. Now, I have stories of our healthcare system and universities going back 13 years ago and going up all the way to last fall, when my bleeding postpartum wife spent 6 hours cradling a 2-day-old baby in the emergency room while not being seen by a physician. When I told the triage nurse I was going to take my wife to another hospital in the next town over, he said, "That would be great, thank you. There is no place for her here." If you go to one of our ERs and get treated like cattle, like my wife was at that time, you have no recourse. They would be really delighted if you took your business elsewhere. When farming is socialized, you get bread lines, and people died of starvation while standing in Soviet bread lines. When healthcare is socialized, you get lines in the ER, and I promise you people have died and are dying in waiting rooms, in emergency rooms across this country right now. You might think that I'm being overwrought and seeing the ghost of communism where it does not exist. However, I would note that we just spent 10 years with a prime minister who, when asked which government in the world he most admired, stated the basic dictatorship of the Communist Chinese Party. A prime minister who released a statement lionizing brutal communist dictator Fidel Castro when he died. A prime minister whose answer to every social problem, dental care, child care, pharmacare, school lunch, climate change, what have you, was always more socialism, more central planning, more top-down pronouncements, less freedom to make choices for yourself and your family. The zenith of all this top-down control came during the pandemic. The members opposite went full communism. They locked Canadians down in their homes. They ruined weddings, funerals, Easters, proms, and Christmases. They closed the borders. They kept mothers from children and brothers from sisters. They deprived this House of its ancient rights. They spent $600 billion of taxpayer money with no budget, doubled our national debt to pay healthy 16-year-olds to sit in their basement. Then, as now, they did all this in the name of crisis management. Physicians, professors, and journalists who spoke out against these abuses were hunted down. They had their licenses and their jobs threatened. I know this because it happened to me. At Queen's University, where I taught, Jane Philpott herself, one of the only 2 cabinet ministers to speak truth to Justin Trudeau's power, informed me in her dean's office that the reason the administration had to harass me was that I criticized the government. That is a direct quote. Of course, the Prime Minister and his commissars were immune from all of this. He could attend gatherings of greater than 5 if it suited his political purposes, like a George Floyd protest in Ottawa, and he did. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals claimed unto themselves the power to censor the news, to violate free speech in the name of fighting misinformation, while they themselves promoted misinformation. They gave luxurious contracts to their friends in academia to promote their misinformation. They gave hundreds of millions of dollars to mainstream media to promote government narratives. These 3 institutions, government, media, and the academy, have important roles in society to regulate each other. But under the federal government's bribery scheme, they have ended up, like the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, out to sea, stewing in each other's bathwater. When ordinary, everyday Canadians came here to Ottawa complaining that their charter rights to bodily autonomy, assembly, and free movement were being violated, every member of the Liberal caucus voted to trample their rights further. They violated Section 2 and Section 8 of the Charter in imposing the Emergencies Measures Act. It is not me saying that, but Justice Mosley of the Federal Court. They trampled on the charter rights they claimed to revere, and then they laughed about it. The current Minister of Transport, in particular, laughed about it, Mr. Speaker. If we cannot speak truth to their power, everything will continue to break. And that is why I had to come here, Mr. Speaker. I refuse to be a cog in their broken machine. I hope it is the case that this darkness left with the former Prime Minister, and I beseech the new Prime Minister to turn to the light, to defend those values enshrined in our anthem, truth, strength, and freedom. I read his book, Mr. Speaker. The book was called Values, and freedom, I'm sorry to say, is not among those therein discussed. The repackaging of their socialist plans in bankers' socks might fool some of the people some of the time, but I will tell you who it is not fooling. It is not fooling the multicultural communities in Kitchener-South Hespeler, the Romanians, Albanians, Polish, Ukrainians, Serbians, Croatians, Lithuanians, Venezuelans, Chinese, Somalis, and Ethiopians with lived experience of socialism who know what they are seeing and don't like it and sent me here. They came here for freedom, not just any freedom, but our specific embodied Canadian freedoms. These freedoms are ours, but they are not merely ours, and they are certainly not ours to discard. They were fought for at Runnymede and encoded in the Magna Carta. They were fought for in the English Civil Wars, the Glorious Revolution, and enshrined in the Declaration of Right. They were fought for in the World Wars and enacted in Diefenbaker's Bill of Rights. They were fought for by both my grandfathers, by all of our grandparents, and embodied in all of us here. So the answer to the question of why I came here, I'm here to speak truth to power on behalf of the people of Kitchener-South Hespeler. I will be happy to go back to being a physician and professor once I can practice in truth and freedom again, once we can all live in truth and freedom again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may God keep our land glorious and free.
There you go. And Andrew Lawton is behind him there. You can see him standing up. And wow, like what a barn burner, right? Like that's a good speech. Bravo, Dr. Strauss. How could I stop any of that, right? Like I think that all of that needs to be said and needs to be said again, and share that with people. It's unbelievable. And I think finally, right, refreshing. So moving on just a little bit, Mark Carney had a meeting with all of the premiers talking about doing something about energy, diversifying, building pipelines, building big projects to not tank Canadian steel and so on. And we're going to have to wait 2 years, I guess, is what the message is kind of going to be, or is coming out of this. Chris is responding to Mark Carney. Mark Carney says, this morning, the premiers and I will meet in Saskatoon to break down the trade barriers that weaken our economy and get major nation-building projects built faster. It's time to build one Canadian economy. And Chris says that's gaslighting, translation, communist or globalist communism. Yeah, that kind of looks like it to me. And Concerns Canadian is sharing the CTV write-up on this. Mark Carney meets premiers in Saskatoon to discuss projects. Talk is cheap. There's no specific project that's discussed, and that's interesting. Bonnie says these clips are from the press conference that followed. So all of these clips down here, right, are from the press conference, and it's a press conference with the Prime Minister and all the premiers. this is a very important one to Albertans because we want to know how our Premier's tough stance towards Carney was received. Some people are saying Premier Smith's statements were weak, even a pushover. I didn't see it that way. I saw diplomatic statements that stoked Carney's ego diplomatically while still standing firm on defending Alberta's interests. Because you'll see tons of 30-second clips from this presser, many out of context, no doubt. I put these notes and clips together for reference. It starts with a summary from Carney, and I'm not going to lie, I see trouble. All federal barriers to intra-provincial trade and labor mobility will be eliminated. The federal government will input from provinces and territories, and First Nations will identify and expedite proposed nation-building projects. To be deemed in the national interest, these projects should strengthen the national economy, strengthen our autonomy, resilience, and security, provide undeniable benefits to Canada, have a high likelihood of successful execution, be of high priority to Indigenous leaders, drive Canada's clean growth potential. Under the new process, once the project has been deemed to be in the national interest, so I wonder how long that takes, 7, 10, 15 years. Is this project in the national interest? What is national interest? Let's debate that for a couple of years. Anyway, a new federal project office. They have to stand up a new federal project office to get this done now? Okay. We'll bring together all relevant federal departments to provide a single set of conditions that must be met for those projects to advance. The commitment is to proceed with the approval process for a maximum of 2 years. So now, these things that haven't gotten built for 10 years, that have had processes and a whole bunch of stuff, and people, the Liberals buy a pipeline, and then has the pipeline been finished yet? I have no idea. Is XL up and running? I don't think so, but I could be wrong about that. We're supposed to believe that all of these, what's going to happen is all of these things that maybe were in process and in the middle of multiple different things are now going to get all reset, and then they're all going to get reviewed for national national interest qualification, and then they're all going to get pushed through this new 2-year process. And do you think it's actually going to be 2 years? It sounds like already there's multiple stakeholders here that need a new project manager to QB the whole thing, which is completely effing ridiculous. Wow. Like I'm not expecting this is actually going to work, but here it is. The feds will also work toward one project review, including through new cooperation agreements with the province. The point is to build the certainty, stability, and ambition that builders need to catalyze the enormous investment needed to turn Canada into an energy superpower and to build the strongest economy in the G7. I think the term energy superpower is ambiguous enough to be interpreted in many ways. And you could become an energy superpower with wind energy. You could become an energy superpower with solar energy, right? There's no other solar energy superpower ever in the world, right? But maybe energy superpower for solar is 10 megawatts, right? Like they can define it as whatever they want. We're a superpower because nobody else is doing this. Well, nobody else is doing it because it's not viable, you moron. But here we are being an energy superpower. I think people assume that it means unleashing oil and gas and LNG, and I think that we are being having our assumptions used against us. Right? I'll be shit shocked if Mark Carney builds a pipeline, is what I'm trying to say. Many potential. Oh, and they're going to build the strongest economy in the G7. No, they're not. They've been saying that for years, and they've failed miserably. Many potential projects were discussed, including but not limited to the Western and Arctic corridors, the Eastern Energy Partnership, critical mineral pathways, the next stage of nuclear from uranium to small modular reactors to large-scale nuclear, a series of infrastructure investments for export diversification from ports to rails to last-mile roads. All First Ministers agreed that Indigenous partnerships and equity will be central to success. Yep. Super good. This is never going to work. Upcoming federal legislation will mandate both meaningful consultation with Indigenous peoples, both during the process of determining which projects get approved and developing the conditions for each project. He says the goal is to get projects approved faster so we can create more high-paying jobs. And he finishes by saying the meeting demonstrates how we can give ourselves more than any other foreign government can ever take away. We're in a position where we can build big, build bold, build one Canadian economy, build now. You're like, okay, sure. Here's Danielle Smith. This is long, but I wanted to show you a shorter one. Here she is talking about pipelines. Here we go.
Would decarbonize the production of their bitumen through the use of carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Ultimately, using hydroelectric or small modular nuclear to decarbonize, and then direct air capture for the last mile. I think the point I was making to the Prime Minister and my colleagues is that there's lots of ways to decarbonize, but the Pathways project is an expensive project. It would cost anywhere from $10 to $20 billion to get built. And to make the economic case for that, having more egress with more barrels to be sold to Asia is the way to pay for it. If we had a 1 million barrel a day pipeline going to the Northwest BC coast, that would generate about $20 billion a year in revenues. And so that seems like a pretty good value proposition if both of those projects can proceed at once.
Next question, pushing.
Yep, but I'm not holding my breath. I'm not holding my breath. There's a whole bunch of other videos. Here's another one from Danielle Smith. This is another minute-long one. This may actually overlap with the one we just saw. CBC Watcher says, if we'd built Northern Gateway and Keystone, yeah, she's talking about lost opportunities and the cost of that. So the cost of 10 years of not building these assets to enrich ourselves is that we don't have them, and now everything costs more, and we don't have that money that we could have had every year, $20 billion or whatever it is. So here she is again, Danielle Smith.
Why tie the issue of getting a commitment for an oil pipeline to national unity?
Well, you have to understand just how damaged Alberta is by the fact that we didn't get pipelines built. If we had built Northern Gateway, if we'd built Keystone and we'd built Energy East, we'd have 2.5 million barrels more per day of production, which is $55 billion a year worth of GDP value, which is worth $17 billion to my government alone and about an equal amount to the federal government. So this is not just an ideological argument. It's not just a minor disagreement. Oil is by far the most valuable export for Canada. Any of the projects that you will see on the ultimate list, I will tell you that a bitumen pipeline will be by far the greatest benefit to all of Canada. That's why we're going to continue to push for it, because it's a good project. It's good for our country. There's $9 trillion worth of value in discoverable and achievable reserves right now. And so why would you leave that in the ground? No other country in the world would, and we shouldn't either.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. Even at $60 a barrel, she says that's $9 trillion worth of asset, right? If you have an asset, you should develop it. Why not, right? And you got to spend money to make money, right? But once you've got that thing rolling, then the money you're making will easily cover the spend that you have to make to develop it. Easily, right? So what are we doing? It's ridiculous. Doug Ford's talking, he says, when our country comes under attack, we unite. And Doug Ford isms aside, I don't know. I'm so sick of this liberal.
When our country comes under attack from President Trump, we unite. And
I think the globalists are under attack from President Trump. All these people who are saying, oh, Trump's the problem. Trump didn't flood our country with illegals. Trump didn't increase our immigration to 2 million, Mark Carney. Trump didn't do all these things. Trump didn't destroy us economically. We did that to ourselves. So blaming Trump is I'm so sick of it. I'm so over it. And people are they're in love with this idea that Trump is somehow to blame for the problems of our own government. And even our own government is saying, this great scapegoat, Trump. Give me a break, Doug Ford. You're the problem. Okay. You're a liberal. He promised to get rid of the SOGI stuff. He promised to get rid of affirmative action. He promised to be conservative. And then he comes in and the SOGI's worse, the gender ideology. The affirmative action's worse, black brilliance nonsense. And fundamentally, he took over for Kathleen Wynne and continued doing exactly what she was doing.
we're a resilient country, and everyone realizes that if we don't move, we'll be left behind. And the consequences will be 10 times worse if we just sit back and do absolutely nothing. I describe Canada, and excuse the pun, as a big, huge gold mine. Now we have to start mining the gold, getting it out there. And no matter if it's the energy corridors being...
We don't have gold. Like Justin Trudeau sold our last gold mine, didn't he? After Stephen Harper was Stephen Harper acquiring gold or selling gold? Justin Trudeau sold the last one, and I think China owns it. So gold mine, weird.
As you've heard many of us say, being an energy superpower around the world, be it oil and gas, or be it nuclear energy and small modular reactors that we're leading the G7, that's what we need to do. We need to unleash. And as Premier Smith said, we have to create the environment and the conditions for companies to come here and invest. If we continue putting red tape and regulations and high taxes, guess what? No one's going to come and invest. but we're all confident, and I'm confident with the leadership of the Prime Minister that he's creating that environment and conditions for people to come here and companies to come here and invest and tell the world Canada's open for business. I'll leave you with this. United we stand, divided we fall, and I can tell you we're a united group.
Well, I can tell you, I don't believe a word comes out of your mouth. United, you guys can all be united, but if you're all globalists, you can get effed. Like, see you later. I'm not interested. Food Professor says, we don't need binding legislation to protect dairy and supply management. That's Mark Carney on April 3rd. We don't need binding legislation for that. May 30th, however, we need binding legislation to protect dairy and supply management. Carney's supply management stance aged like unrefrigerated milk, right? So, very, very interesting. Chief Billy Morin says the Liberal government has made no firm commitment to repeal anti-Canadian energy laws and that hold us back from reaching our full potential as a nation. Canadians will not tolerate the continuation of empty speeches for long. Yeah, kicking this down the road 2 years, and then when 2 years is up and no pipelines have been built and nothing has really changed and nothing's moved forward, do you think that we'll give them another 2 years, right? At this point in time, they're standing up bureaucracy. They're standing up a new agency to quarterback getting projects done fast. If we need an agency, why didn't we have an agency before? We didn't need an agency before. Businesses would just come in and do it. So why do we need a socialist agency to run things now? And it seems like stalling. It seems like busy work. Like before, I went to an all-inclusive resort years ago, like during my honeymoon, I think 2000, long time ago, 2007, I think. And so we went on an excursion, and the guys driving us were pulling our chain. They were driving us around, wasting our time. And we were like, what? They took us to look at chiclet trees. They took us to look at all these things. And then they tried to combine. So they were a tour company, and they were trying to combine 2 tours into one to save them money. So I was like, you guys are just wasting our time. You guys are just screwing around with us in order to meet the other bus and then combine the 2 buses. And there wasn't enough room in the single bus for everybody that they wanted to combine. There was like 9 seats and there was 12 people in total. And I was like, no, this is not happening. And I said, you could take us back to the hotel. And we ended up getting a free thing. But my point is, we're being lied to for them to buy time, for them to pull the bait and switch later and say, oh, well, the promises made were actually this, not that. And then we can have it on video and they'll just lie anyway. But they have no intention of actually doing anything. They're just resetting the clock and saying, we're definitely going to do something. And we're going to look at chiclet trees, right? We're not actually going to the destination that they're promising. We're going to look at chiclet trees, and then we're going to go meet another van in the middle of the highway and be told to switch vans. And I was like, no effing way. You can take us back to the hotel right now. Bye-bye. Nope. And I said, if you don't start moving, I'm going to start calling people. And they got like upset and they're like, uh-oh. And I don't think at the time Google, like I couldn't threaten a 1-star review, but now I'd be like, listen, buddy, I'm putting a 1-star review right now because you've kidnapped me. And like, I don't like this at all. This is my power right now. But yeah, man, we're being jerked around. Okay. This is the last set of tabs for the free show. We've got ostrich updates, Ukraine updates, USA. I'm not talking about Gay Pride Month, because it's veterans. We're doing Veterans Month now, right? Like, so I'm just highlighting some weird stories in the page show that are weird. It's not hitting the way it used to, and people are upset about that. But this is the last series of tabs for the free show. So I got my YouTube channel back, and I kind of talked about that at the beginning, and I'll be uploading here. And it's crazy to scroll through and look at all the shows and look at the sweaters. Like, I've had this sweater for this long. I can't believe it. This is medium gray, and where's big gray? Big gray is the black one. This is big gray, and big gray is retired now. I can't wear it because it's like getting threadbare. I think the sleeve's going to fall off. And so medium gray has taken over, but I can't believe that medium gray has been around for this long. Like, medium gray was new when I lost my YouTube channel. So anyway, it's fun to go back in time, and it's interesting that this has happened now. I have no idea why. There's no good explanation on why they'd give me my YouTube channel back. I've been told that I'm, person non grata and I violated the terms. But Ron, as I said in the intro yesterday, said, hey, you should see if you can appeal. Like, people are getting their channels back. And I was like, weird. Okay. So I did, and I was rude about it. And they gave me my channel back, and they sent me an email that said, yeah, it turns out you didn't violate our terms of service. And they said that in writing. And I feel like 4 years of lost revenue I'm sure there's going to be a class action. So when there's a class action, send it my way, because I'm going to join it. But it's crazy what's happened and what is happening. And I really didn't see getting my YouTube channel back, but here we are. So crazy, right? 13,000 subscribers. Hey, everybody. Crazy. Haven't seen you in a while. Orwell says, just noticed something. Grok hides entire conversations. No thread, no history, just vanishes. You can't retrace what led where. The only way you can see it is by having this link and scrolling up. If you do it the other way, it's hidden, even to the account writer. So you can only see a whole thread if you have the bottom of the thread and you can scroll up. So yeah, it's very, very concerning. I've seen evidence of this on my own threads. I've seen censorship, and the censorship on X is getting more insidious and kind of hidden. And so maybe that's why they're returning my YouTube channel now. Somebody was telling me that they can't find it in a search. But you can just go to YouTube, see Canada Poly, and that should, it's a, what's it called? Special link. It's not a special link. It's a branded link. So you should be able to go right there, but it doesn't show up in searches apparently. So that's interesting. I don't know if that's going to change, but maybe they've solved that whole problem with AI, and now they can just, you can have your YouTube channel and scream into the void and nobody will listen to you, right? Because they'll just censor you anyway. So who knows, but I find that interesting, and the timing is also interesting. We'll have to kill the stream now, everybody. We're already at 40 minutes, and I don't like going longer than that. So thanks for watching, everybody, on the stream, and we will catch you tomorrow. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful